Hello, welcome to R&B Reviews. I'm Rob, and since the recent Star Trek movie featuring the original characters is doing very well at the box office, there might be some people out there that want to know more about the films. So I'm going to review the first 6 Star Trek films that feature the original actors. I will not be reviewing the Star Trek movies that were done by Star Trek The Next Generation. And just to let everyone know, even though I have seen these films, it doesn't necessarily make me an expert, so if I end up saying the wrong information, I apologize. Alright, the first Star Trek film is Star Trek, the motion picture, the only film in the series that the original TV show's creator Gene Roddenberry produced and had the control over. A cloud in space has destroyed a Klingon vessel and is heading towards Earth. The USS Enterprise is being sent to figure out what the cloud is and how to stop it before it arrives on Earth. Admiral Kirk wants to be on board the ship, much to the chagrin of Captain Decker, played by Stephen Collins, who is supposed to be heading this mission. The cast of the TV show are also on board to investigate. It turns out that the cloud is housing someone or something called V'ger and is trying to find its creator. So who or what is V'ger's creator? This first film in the series, in my opinion, is probably the most different and probably the most visually stunning of the whole series. For one, it doesn't have any fighting, nor are any of the famous phasers fired in this movie. Instead, it's more of a thinker's film, in which the film kind of asks us to think about who we are and what our purpose is. The images from this film, such as when the Enterprise is first passing through the clouds, are fantastic, and I can imagine how this film would have looked on the big screen. And also, the dramatic score by composer Jerry Goldsmith is just perfect for this film. But I felt the uniforms in this movie were a bit bland compared to the ones that were used in the rest of the series. And also, the length of the movie might turn some people off, but I do think this film is worth a look. Now, there are 3 cuts of this movie. There's the original theatrical cut that runs 132 minutes, the recent director's edition that runs 136 minutes, as well as an extended home video cut that runs at 143 minutes. So which version do I recommend? Personally, I recommend the director's edition because the special effects have been updated and the film feels more whole. But not to worry, the DVD special features includes the scenes that were left out that originally appeared in the theatrical cut but were left out of the director's edition, including the original special effects, which look a little bit dated, as well as the scenes that only appeared in the extended cut. The second film, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which kind of forms a trilogy that starts there and continues into the 4th film. The Enterprise is training a new crew, Spock is now the captain, and Kirk is on board mainly to inspect the ship before it heads out. But meanwhile, in another part of the galaxy, Chekhov and Captain Terrell, played by Paul Winfield, are looking for a planet with no life forms on it for something called the Genesis Project, a process where a lifeless planet can be reconfigured into a new living planet. But if it is used on a planet that already has life, it will simply destroy what's already there. Chekhov and Terrell find a possible planet, but when they arrive, they find a survivor named Khan, played by Ricardo Montalban, who is a product of 20th century genetic engineering, who encountered Kirk and the Enterprise crew from an episode of the original 1966 TV series called Space Seed. Khan is hell-bent on getting revenge on Kirk for what happened in that episode, and he and his band of genetic supermen kidnap Chekhov and Captain Terrell and plan to steal the Genesis Project and use it to trap Kirk. This is probably my favorite in the series. The theme of life and death I thought was an interesting element, and the uniforms looked more appealing. It also got to explore a little bit of Kirk's past, and when it turns out that Kirk's ex and his son are behind the Genesis Project. This felt more like an episode of the Star Trek TV show compared to the previous film, but I thought this film had a little bit more of a cheaper look, and Khan's henchmen kind of seemed bland and just not as colorful as Khan himself. Now, do I recommend that you watch the TV show before you see the film? Honestly, I really don't, because I've seen this movie many times before I ended up seeing the TV show that Khan originally appeared in, and I wasn't confused, and there's actually a scene in the movie where Khan kind of explains to Chekhov and Terrell what happened. But I do recommend checking out the TV show episode as a supplement. You can find it on the Season 1 box set of the TV show. Also, with this movie, the last 20 minutes of the film, including when Spock sacrifices his life for the Enterprise, was one of the most moving experiences I had with Star Trek. So why did I just give that away? Because it leads into the third film, Star Trek III: In Search of Spock. Directed by Leonard Nimoy, the movie takes place almost immediately after the previous film, as an empty Kirk and crew are heading back to docking bay. When they arrive, they are told they are not allowed to go to where the planet that the Genesis project was activated on because it's being tested on. But to complicate the matter, Spock is buried on the planet, and his father, Sarek, tells Kirk that Dr. McCoy is harboring Spock's essence from before he died, and they must go to get Spock's body and take it over to his home planet Vulcan in order to resurrect Spock. Meanwhile, a group of Klingons, whose captain is played by Christopher Lloyd, plans on visiting the Genesis planet to steal the project's secrets, but the planet is made of unstable elements and is deteriorating. This film is not as exciting as the previous film, but the film I thought had much stronger acting, and I thought Lloyd made an excellent villain. The dialogue just didn't really have the bite that the other two films had, and the film I thought got off to a good start, but I felt like it was just missing adrenaline, especially for a fight scene that happens later in the film between Kirk and the Klingon captain. Each character had a motive for their role in the fight, and I felt like the fight itself should have had more in it. The movie is good, but I felt like it wasn't the best in the series. Now, the fourth entry, The Voyage Home, is a more fun entry. Starfleet is considering charging Kirk with 6 charges and possibly court-martialing him. But meanwhile, a probe is destroying ships in space and is heading towards Earth, vaporizing oceans and affecting the weather. The Federation is unable to communicate with the probe, but Kirk and the Enterprise crew are on their way back from Vulcan to Earth, and they receive a warning to stay back. The probe's language turns out to be pretty similar to humpback whales, but unfortunately they are now extinct. The crew decides to take a chance to go back in time to the end of the 20th century, try to find 2 humpback whales in order for them to communicate with the probe. And when they arrive, they experience a big culture clash between them and people from the late 80s. Kirk and Spock do end up finding 2 whales at an aquarium, but they're going to be shipped out in 24 hours. Can the crew find them before it's too late? The film is more of an enjoyable romp with many memorable scenes, such as when Kirk and Spock encounter a punk on a bus, and Scotty attempting to communicate with an 80s computer. The cast seems to be having a really good time and having fun with this material, and it gives them something to do instead of just standing or sitting around the Enterprise. I felt that some of the Voyager Home's comedy sequences, such as one that takes place in a hospital, can be a little bit cartoonish at times, but the film is enjoyable, and I think Star Trek fans and people new to the series will find it enjoyable. Now, Star Trek V: The Final Frontier finds the crew on shore leave when Scotty receives a distress call on the Enterprise. A revolutionary Vulcan named Sybok is holding 3 peace delegates hostage on the planet Nimbus 3 and plans on taking the Enterprise and brainwashing the crew to go to Shakari, where he is on a quest to find higher knowledge and a godlike figure. William Shatner, who plays Kirk in Star Trek, directs this film, and although I thought that the elements were there, I feel the movie just didn't come together as a whole. There are some good moments, such as when Kirk and McCoy are trying to teach Spock campfire songs while they're on shore leave, and the connection between Spock and Sybok was pretty interesting. I thought the theme of finding God was pretty interesting, but I felt that with a more experienced director and a more polished script, this could have been a more fascinating film. Also, there's a subplot involving a Klingon who wants to destroy the Enterprise, which I thought started out pretty well, but then it kind of sputtered to a disappointing conclusion. And some of the supporting characters, such as David Warner, who plays one of the peace delegates, they start out strong, but then as the film progresses, he kind of gets pushed into the background a little bit. I think the film had some interesting ideas, but I felt that the film just needed a little bit more work. Now, the last film, The Undiscovered Country, has the crew's final mission to escort the Klingon Chancellor to a peace summit after their moon is deteriorating, and it could mean the end of the Klingon race. But when the Klingon ship is later attacked and the Enterprise is held responsible and accused of shooting at the Klingon vessel, Kirk and McCoy are put on trial, and the crew has to prove their innocence. This film I felt the most gripping with this film because it was more like a mystery. The film had some impressive costumes and alien makeup, and wonderful cinematography. And it was also interesting to note that this movie came out when the Soviet Union was crumbling, so seeing similarities between that and the Klingon race crumbling was pretty interesting. Now, which Star Trek movie do I recommend that I start with? Well, that depends on what type of science fiction you like. If you want the more smarter, intelligent film, Star Trek, the motion picture might be a good place to start. But if you're looking for more of an action movie, I would probably say to start with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. But still, I think all these films are worth looking into. Thank you very much for watching R&B Reviews. If you want to leave any feedback or if you have any comments about any of the Star Trek films, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching R&B Reviews.